News came out yesterday, and it didn't surprise anyone to see Alabama's Nick Saban as part of ESPN's College Game Day and other potential media that may happen around the draft, around college football. Nobody was surprised by that. Saban had been a mainstay on the program, on the network. Anytime his team wasn't competing for a championship, it seemed like he was right there chatting with Reese Davis and some of the guys about whatever the matchup would be. Obviously, that goes all the way back until 2013 when Saban was on air when Florida State was in the national championship against Auburn. So not necessarily a surprise, but also just one more thing that makes FSU fans roll their eyes after how the last 2 months have gone down. Well, what are we talking about? Well, you obviously know about the college football playoff exclusion. We talked about how Saban, the Alabama factor, all of that played a role back in December. Then in January, when news broke that Saban would retire, the speculation then became pretty rampant, and not just from FSU fans that, maybe it makes sense why Alabama was given one more chance to make a run at it, because this would be Saban's final run. And certainly Saban didn't just decide this yesterday, speaking on the day that he retired. Certainly they knew. Certainly Saban knew. Certainly there was a contingency plan. That's obviously how Alabama was able to move so quickly. And if the powers that be knew, if the powers that be that control ESPN and control the SEC and all of those same bigwigs knew that Saban was retiring, maybe, just maybe, that was part of why Alabama got in, because this was Saban's final run. We've got to give them one more chance. And they were honestly a few plays away from beating Michigan. And had they beaten Michigan, I certainly think they had a great chance against Washington. And what a story that would have been if Saban could have ridden off into the sunset with another national championship. The idea that Saban just had no clue that he was retiring until just a day or two before it happened is complete nonsense. And it's something that Alabama fans continue to spew, but it just isn't based in reality at the end of the day. However, this last twist, it certainly provides an interesting angle, an interesting aspect. Nick Saban going to ESPN, the very outlet that campaigned for him to be able to make the playoff. The very outlet that employs Greg McElroy and Kirk Herbstreit and others who begged and pleaded for the committee to do the right thing and put Alabama into the playoff, put Nick Saban into the playoff. Never mind the fact that Alabama barely beat a very bad Auburn team and needed an absolute miracle to do that. Never mind the fact that Kirk Herbstreit was jumping up and down like you've never seen before, celebrating Saban and Alabama winning that Iron Bowl while he was calling an FSU game. Never mind the fact that they lost a two-score game to Texas. Never mind the fact that they struggled with USF. No, never mind any of that. All that matters is Jordan Travis is out. We need Alabama in the playoff. And interestingly enough, you now have Saban working for the same exact entity that was doing all of that campaigning. Coincidence? Maybe. I don't know. We've seen just over the last couple of days through National Signing Day that Kirk Herbstreit maybe not the most unbiased when it comes to pulling strings, when it comes to where he thinks kids should go to high school, who he thinks should go to the playoff. You see, there's a narrative out there that says, well, ESPN doesn't determine who's in the playoff. To that, I'll say you're probably a little off, but I can understand it, right? Like, I'll go with that logic, and we'll say the committee is separate than ESPN. I don't know that I buy that, but let's say you're right on that. Let's quelch the conspiracy of ESPN pulling the strings. If you don't think that the biggest face in college football right now, college football media, being Kirk Herbstreit, campaigning for weeks on end, honestly, before Jordan Travis even got hurt, if you don't think that the committee members, and you don't think that Boo Corrigan and those on the College Football Playoff Committee are not impacted by the narratives that ESPN continues to twist and spin, then you're wrong. Just like Dylan Raiola's dad was impacted by it, and Dylan Raiola's commitment was impacted by it, the committee members were impacted by it as well. And so, yeah, did Kirk Herbstreit hold a gun to the committee members and say, you've got to pick Florida State out and Alabama in? No, I don't think so. But I think him repeating the same tired narrative week after week after week, ignoring Alabama's faults and magnifying Florida State's weakness, no quarterback, certainly did play a factor, did play an impact. And now Nick Saban works for that very entity. The most interesting part of this is something I haven't even brought up yet. But just before I do that, I want to give some love to Rohan Law. Been following Doug Rohan over at Rohan Law on Twitter. He has been all over this FSU ACC litigation and has helped explain this process in simple terms. If you haven't done so, follow his social media account on any platform that you regularly use. Rohan Law is based in Atlanta and wants to be your best friend on your worst day. If you've been arrested or hurt at work, his team is ready to help protect your rights. Call Rohan Law for your free consultation today. Make sure you let them know that Double Fries No Slaw sent you. The most interesting thing to me about this is, how is Nick Saban going to work as an advisor for Alabama and work unbiased for ESPN at the same time? Is that possible? Could you possibly be an unbiased voice doing that? Is that not some kind of conflict of interest? Is that not some kind of collusion? Or is that not somewhat weighing your options a little too heavy? It's fine if you want to be silently impacted by the committee or by ESPN or by Kirk Herbstreit or whomever, but how do you play both sides of the card at this point? How do you now work with recruits? How do you now work with anyone on that roster? How are you both an advisor for Alabama and working for ESPN at the same time? At the end of the day, I guess they have the same bosses. When you look at it, the people who pull the strings at ESPN are the same people who pull the strings at the SEC, which obviously Alabama falls under. And so maybe it actually makes more sense than I'm giving it credit for. Maybe it's just a consolidation of power. Maybe the ESPN SEC power-hungry animal and beast that it is can now just operate smoothly because they have a very easy go-between. No more of this, oh, are they in bed together? Are they colluding? No, you don't have to worry about that. Nick Saban for ESPN, it's the same thing at the end of the day. Saban for Alabama, Saban for ESPN, it is truly all one. It's one entity at this point. The SEC runs ESPN and ESPN runs the SEC. That's how college football coverage works at this point. What will end up happening with this? Does Saban continue to be an advisor? Does he continue to have an office at Alabama? I would guess so. And he will be now a voice for ESPN, an unbiased voice, just like Kirk Herbstreit, and just like Pat McAfee, and just like Reese Davis, and just like the others that campaigned for Florida State to not be in the playoffs. Some of them starting, again, before Jordan Travis even got hurt. It's just something that makes FSU fans, I'm sure, laugh and smile just a little bit, knowing everything they said about the network, about the SEC, about Kirk Herbstreit, about all of these characters ended up being true. Everything they thought, all of the conspiracy, all of the tinfoil hat ended up playing itself out. Was Florida State left out of the playoff because Nick Saban would eventually have a job with ESPN? I don't think so. I don't think that that's what happened. If it did, okay. But it's interesting to see how it all plays out in the end with Nick Saban, the one who benefited from ESPN's absolute gargling of their play, despite it being very mediocre, both in the regular season and in the playoff, benefiting by getting a job there. Let me know your thoughts. Maybe this is the last playoff exclusion video we do. Maybe it's not. I know Miami fans that are still upset and bent out of shape over that bad non-pass interference call against Ohio State in 2002. Florida State fans aren't going to forget this soon either. I appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll talk to you soon. Go Noles.